Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Cheva Narotamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jaya Mudiraye. Hare Krishna. Good evening to everyone. Today we will read, at least we will start from the 56th verse of the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad-gita, as it is, entitled The Perfection of Renunciation. The verse in Sanskrit: Sarva karmani api sada kurvanaha mat vyapashrayaha mat prasadat avapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvyapashrayaha matprasadatavapnoti shashvatam padamavyayam sarvakarmanyapi sada kurvano madvyapashrayaha matprasadat avapnoti shashvatam padamavyayam. Sarva, all, karmani, activities, api, although, sada, always, kurvanaha, performing, madvyapashrayaha, under my protection, matprasadat, by my mercy, avapnoti, one achieves, shashvatam, the eternal, padam, abode, avyayam, imperishable. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhakti Vijnana Goswami Prabhupada. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. Purport. The word madvyapashrayaha means under the protection of the Supreme Lord. To be free from material contamination, a pure devotee acts under the direction of the Supreme Lord or his representative, the spiritual master. There is no time limitation for a pure devotee. He is always 24 hours a day, 100% engaged in activities under the direction of the Supreme Lord. To a devotee who is thus engaged in Krishna consciousness, the Lord is very, very kind. In spite of all difficulties, he is eventually placed in the transcendental abode of Krishna Loka. He is guaranteed entrance there. There is no doubt about it. In that supreme abode, there is no change. Everything is eternal, imperishable, and full of knowledge. Again, translation. Though engaged in all kinds of activities, my pure devotee, under my protection, reaches the eternal and imperishable abode by my grace. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatyadesatarine Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Ajanulambita Bhujopana Kavadata Sankirtanaya Kapitaro Kamalaya Taksha Vishwambaro Dvijavaro Yugadharma Palo Vande Jagat Priya Karo Karunavatara Yantah Pravishya Mama Vachimam Prasuptam Sanjivayata Kila Shakti Darak Svadamna Anyams Chahasta Charana Shravana Tvagadim Pranannamo Bhagavate Purushaya Tubhyam Svasyasta Vishwasya Kalak Prasidatam Deyantu Bhutani Shivam Mithodhiya Manascha Badram Bhajata Tadoksaje Aveshyatam Nomatir Atyahai Tuki. Hare Krishna again to everyone. I feel special sort of feelings I have now because this is the place where Srila Prabhupada many years back, more than 50 years back, started his movement. And he based the philosophy of Bhagavad-gita as the foundation for the whole movement. And he called his movement Krishna consciousness, which means that the very point or the very essence of the practice which we have to do is to be conscious of God or Krishna all the time. And here in this section of Bhagavad-gita, Krishna is concluding the whole speech, and he wants to make sure that we understand everything correctly. So in this last chapter of Bhagavad-gita, he puts everything in the proper perspective. Because Bhagavad-gita, even though it's a very small book, it only has 700 verses in it, still it touches so many subject matters. It's really amazing how comprehensive this book it is. It talks about the modes of material nature, how the modes of material nature manifest differently in different people, in different events and phenomena of this world. He talks about different kinds of yoga, he talks about meditation, he talks about renunciation of this world, he talks about so many different subject matters. It's really amazing how Krishna manages in a very succinct and a very, at the same time, very beautiful way to put everything together in this small book. But now he wants to make everything completely clear. Because when you speak about so many different subject matters, you know, especially when the audience is a little new, then the audience may get bewildered and, you know. And usually what happens when somebody speaks, his mind is a little faster than the mind of the audience. So he's already somewhere ahead and the audience is still somewhere behind and they're still trying to figure out what was said. So, concluding this work, Sri Krishna wants to make everything very, very clear. And therefore, in this end of the 18th chapter, he more or less summarizes the three main paths of spiritual development. In this day and age, we have so much variety of different spiritual paths. If you go to any esoteric bookshop or you Google something, you will get thousands and thousands. Even the word yoga, there will be so many different meanings of what yoga means. And of course, now we are living in this society of consumerism. The consumerism is the religion of the modern day and age. There is no other religion, it's just consumerism. And therefore, there are so many different offers. The first president of France after the Second World War, General de Gaulle, he said, how is it possible to rule the country which has 40 varieties of cheese? Since that time, the varieties of cheese and everything else increased incrementally, So basically his main point was, when the people are so bewildered, and when you go to a supermarket, you become immediately bewildered. You don't know what to do in this place. I don't know about you, I'm talking about myself. I definitely don't know what to do there. So the same sort of phenomena takes place in a spiritual, quote-unquote, area or realm. And there is so many varieties of different paths and, yogas and methods and practices and, so many. I don't know, I'm coming from Russia. I know a few which is popular there. I'm not so familiar what's going on here. But Krishna says that ultimately there is only three paths. That if we, and the rest, of course, a lot of varieties is there, as much as there are three modes of material nature. But by different combination and permutation of different modes, we have the complete spectrum of different phenomena in this world. So in the same way, all these different paths, they are more or less hybrids of the three basic and main roads to the spiritual realm. Every human being feels that something is wrong in this material world, that we feel always little uncomfortable here, even if everything is fine. We still feel that something is rotten in this Danish kingdom, as Shakespeare said. Something is rotten here. It's really rotten. It smells bad. Something is wrong in this place. And therefore, the spiritual quest has always been there. I'm coming from Russia, former Soviet Union. Most of my life I lived under the Soviet regime, and in the Soviet Union there was no God. God was banned. The very word God was prohibited. It could only be written with the small g, and better if he would not be mentioned. But what happened when the country became free, all of a sudden everyone again believes in God. For 70 years, it was not possible. Nobody believed in God. Everyone swore to be an atheist. I did it myself. Well, I was to a certain extent. We would pass exams on scientific atheism. Everyone was brainwashed from the kindergarten that there's no God. The very powerful argument that there is no God was that, the Gagarin, the first spaceman, went to cosmos. He didn't see God. So, if he didn't see God, it's a powerful argument, of course, for stupid people. Anyway, so the point is that you may prohibit religion or spirituality as much as you like. You may try to ban it, you might try to erase it or extinguish, but it's innate to the soul. It's innate to human consciousness. We are all believers. And even if officially we declare that I don't believe in God, you still believe in something, which ultimately is God for you. You may believe in President Trump or President Putin or whatever. It doesn't matter. You still believe in somebody, something, and you still worship somebody. And this quest for spirituality is innate to the soul, to the heart of the human being. And in fact, I'm reading now a very interesting book about the structure of the brain and neuroscience. And the book is called Why God Won't Go Away. And basically the authors, they try to make this point that they're not talking about the soul, because to talk about the soul is unscientific. You can be excommunicated from the scientific community if you dare to talk about the soul. But they talk about the brain and the consciousness and the mind, and they say that it's wired in such a way that you inevitably have some longing, some desire to have spiritual experience which is bigger than the material experience, which you normally or commonly can get by interaction between the senses and the objects of the senses in this world. And therefore Krishna says that if you are to reach this spiritual realm, or if you want to have spiritual experience, and that's actually the main point. It's very interesting because Vedic tradition is not about the dogma, it's not about theory, it's not about something which you have to believe. The Vedic tradition is about experience. You have, and Krishna himself says this in Bhagavad-gita. He says, "Pratyakshavagamam dharmyam susukham kartum avyayam." The point of following some spiritual path is to get the experience, not just to believe, not just to change your belief system or whatever. And Krishna says that if you are to reach the new experience, the spiritual experience, if you want to obtain some spiritual experience, there is basically only three paths. And these three paths, one is the path of karma yoga, the path of pious activity, when you follow certain rules, quite strict rules, and you more or less try to renounce the fruits of your action. You understand that you're not the owner of the fruits of the action. There is a huge machinery of this world. You understand the law of karma. And understanding the law of karma, you're acting, but you're trying to develop the dispassionate attitude towards your action. Yes, it's there, I'm doing this, but I'm duty bound. I'm doing it because of duty, this and that. And what happens, Krishna speaks about this few verses before the verse which we read. And he explains the result of this. He says that as a result of following this path, your heart or your consciousness will become purified. Being purified by his intelligence and controlling the mind with determination, giving up the objects of the sense gratification, being free from attachment, hatred, so on and so forth. It's there in the verses 51 and 53. And the idea is that when you develop certain discipline in your action, you have to be very disciplined in your action, and that ultimately you develop certain qualities which are called, according to Vedic literature, and not only according to Vedic literature, but according to any religious or spiritual tradition, as the purity of the heart. Your consciousness becomes pure. You become kind, you become free from lust, you become free from pride, you become a good person. And that's in itself is a sort of new experience, because we are what we are, but if we gradually change, we feel the relief. when the heart is pure, the immediate experience which we have, we feel relief. The life becomes a very joyful journey. Whereas if we are burdened by all kinds of desires, by all kinds of greeds and anger and this and that, life is a very, it's a very difficult thing to live through, So basically, when you have the pure heart, you become relatively happy in this world, and on the top of it, you prepare your consciousness for the higher practices. Actually, this path of karma yoga is not intended to be the ultimate path for spiritual experience. Is just a preliminary discipline. Sometimes, very often actually, when you ask people about the spirituality, if they don't think that, taking LSD is spirituality, if they're a little more clear in their ideas about spirituality, they will tell you spirituality is to become a good person, to do good, to be good, to be a little disciplined. Krishna says, no. It's a preliminary discipline. This is the discipline which you have to do to purify your heart, but the purification of the heart, it's not the goal in itself. It's a preliminary stage for you to engage in a deeper practices, or more or less in the practice of meditation. By karma yoga, you cannot really reach God, because God is transcendental, He's spiritual, and karma is material. And even if you follow all the discipline, you're still within the material realm. Your consciousness is purified to the extent that you can engage yourself in meditation, because the purified consciousness, you easily can concentrate your mind. Meditation means your mind is focused. And when there is, when we live our normal life, our mind is not very focused. So karma yoga, even though it's glorified very much in many literatures, and in Bhagavad-gita itself, Krishna glorifies karma yoga, still it's a preliminary path to prepare you for the meditation. Because it's by the meditation, by the rules of meditation, you can transcend the material realm. To a certain extent. It's also an overstatement, but according to Krishna in Bhagavad-gita. But still, it's a higher path. Definitely, dhyana-yoga, when dhyana or meditation on sacred syllable Om or whatever is there, it's a higher path, and it gives you a much higher and much more rewarding experience. Krishna himself explains this rewarding experience which people obtain by following the path of yoga or meditation. Krishna explains in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita, where he says that by purified senses, the material senses can only interact with the material objects. And that's, people are excited about this experience, but according to Krishna, it's very dull. And it's really dull. It is dull. Krishna says when in your meditation, you develop the mystical ability to be in another realm, in another dimension, and interact with spiritual senses, with this world. It's much more, it's amazingly much more impressive. I read, sometimes you probably also read some books about near-death experiences, when people leave this mortal body and still they have senses, still they see, still sometimes they hear, and or sometimes, you know, I'm sure you read somewhere, you know, this description, and they inevitably say it's not possible to describe this, because it's such a overwhelming experience when you are interacting with the reality, not through these gross material senses. These gross material senses are gross, and it's really difficult to get the full experience when you're dependent on these gross mechanisms. It's as if, you know, you imagine that you put yourself into a coat, you know, it's a thick coat, and then you try to interact with somebody, you know, just pet somebody. You don't feel anything, you hardly feel anything, and the other person feels a very mechanical touch. So in the same way, we are dressed, the soul, the spirit soul is dressed into this very gross sort of costume, and this very gross suit, and we're interacting with this world, and we think it's nice, but Krishna says it's, you people don't know what you're talking about. This is very dull experience. Just try to get some other higher experience. You will never want to do what you were doing before. And that's a fact. So many people who had this near-death experience, they come back, and they come back changed people. Why? Because they did get the different experience. They see this world differently. We only interact with this world and see this world the way we see because we don't have different experience. So Krishna says, by meditation, by going beyond the material realm and having a glimpse of spiritual experience, you will forget the attachment to all this stuff which is going on here. Why would you be attached if it's so insignificant? So Krishna explains this in the 6th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. He says that in this realm of samadhi, when people reach this stage of samadhi, in the stage of samadhi, by their transcendental senses, they see very bright colors, amazing colors, colors which have nothing to do with the pale colors of this world, and so on and so forth. This dhyana-yoga or dhyana-yoga meditation is already a path, and Krishna speaks about this in a couple verses before the verse which we read. And he says that Brahma Bhuta Prasanatmana Shojati Nakanksati Samach Sarveshu Bhuteshu Mad Bhaktim Labate Param. And he says that Bhakti Mama Bijanati Yavan Yaschasmi Tatvataha Tato Mam Tatvato Gyatva Vishate Mama Tadanantaram. He says ultimately, if you're following this path of meditation, which is a difficult path, which is not so easy, sometimes people say meditation is easy. 15 minutes of meditation every day, very good for your life. After breakfast or before breakfast. They have this really cheap recipes of meditation, but meditation is a very difficult discipline. I remember once I was traveling in a mountain area in the south of India, and there was a cave there where Shankaracharya, the greatest yogi of the old days, he was meditating. Supposedly he obtained his enlightenment in this particular cave. It was a nice cave, not very deep, and there was a shower in this cave. There was, attached shower was there. It was something always dripping from the from the ceiling of this cave. And, part of this cave was dry and nice, and the part of it was, so this was a cozy cave. So we came with a group of people. It's a little difficult to reach, and to our surprise, there was a yogi sitting in this cave. He was in his lotus posture, and he was sitting there with closed eyes. And here's a group of, pilgrims, noisy, who basically came there to see some for sightseeing or whatever. Of course, there was some spiritual purpose also, but we were not really yogis. So, and I was watching him. He was sitting there really trying to concentrate, but at the same time I could see that it doesn't really work for him, because he was always, he was moving slightly, and, he was a little uncomfortable, and especially when these loud people started, trying to get the holy water from the cave or something like this, he was really uncomfortable. So I could see he is definitely not on the samadhi level yet. So what I want to say is that it's a very difficult thing. It's a very difficult thing. It's not that, meditate 15 minutes before breakfast or after breakfast and you're done, you get this transcendental experience. No, you just, maybe your digestion will be a little better. And even this is doubtful. Even this is not really, There may be some benefits of this cheap recipes of meditation, which are so common in our society, but it's not really what meditation means. Meditation is a difficult practice, and therefore Krishna says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma. He very beautifully explains this. He says, Brahma Bhuta Prasanatma, you reach the spiritual level, and the proof of it is that your prasanatma, you become completely joyful. No political problem can really make you unhappy. You just your prasanatma. Prasanatma means your soul become very, very light, very clear. Your consciousness become very clear. Na sochati, na kangsati, you don't have any sochati, you don't have any grief. Kangsati, you don't have any desire. Samah sarveshu bhuteshu, you look at everyone with equal vision. You're not discriminating, you are not really attached or whatever. And then mad bhaktim labate param. Then you start your real experience. So I'm not going to discuss this too much, but that's the second path. First path is karma yoga, second path is dhyana yoga, the path of meditation, where you really can get some sort of real spiritual experience, which Krishna explains in these verses. He says, Vishate tadanantaram. Basically, the goal of this path is Vishate. Vishate means to enter. Vishate means tatomam tatvato gyatva. When somebody knows me, the origin of everything, God, perfectly, Vishate, he enters into me. He become, united. Depending how you look at this, if you are Hare Krishna devotee, you look at this in a negative way and you said, all this is nonsense. But, some people have very beautiful, bombastic words for this. You become unified and, you achieve the super consciousness. Whatever it is, Krishna says, it's a path. It's definitely a path. It's an experience. It's much higher experience than just the experience which you would get when your heart is purified. But obviously, that's really clear. Krishna prefers the third path. He says, yes, objectively speaking, these three paths are there. They're all good. They're all useful. They're all progressive. This is the path for evolution, for the evolution of the consciousness. If you live different way, the consciousness will be degraded. You will physically experience the degradation of the consciousness. So these are all elevated paths to reach the higher goal, but still they are not on the same platform. Krishna obviously prefers the third path, which he describes in this verse which we read. And he says, Mat prasadat avapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam. He says, I will not speak, but I will speak about the result which Krishna promises. He says, Mat prasadat, because of my mercy, because of the mercy of God. Mat prasadat in ablative case, which is the causation. It means because of my mercy, by my mercy, avapnoti means he gets. What he gets, shashvatam padam avyayam. Shashvatam means eternal, padam means abode, and avyayam means inexhaustible or imperishable or spiritual abode. So Krishna didn't promise it for the travelers of other paths. But here he's very clear. He says, by my mercy, I will drag him to the spiritual world. I will give him the spiritual ability. Sorry, I'm speaking Russian. the spiritual position, and in this spiritual position, he will get the eternal life. Shashvatam means eternal, and avyayam means imperishable. And avyayam basically means, because you may think that eternal and imperishable is almost the same, but it's not the same, because avyayam also means it's ever new. Sometimes people, they wonder, okay, I know what to do in this world. It's little, boring, but sometimes it's exciting. You may go to Mexico or Brazil or Russia for this. But what I will do there in the spiritual world, Krishna says, don't worry, you will like it there. It's not boring. It's ever new. It's ever fresh. It's constantly new experience. Avyayam means that you cannot reach the bottom of it. That's what literally avyayam means. Avyayam means it's eternal, but at the same time it's ever new. So Krishna says, this is the experience which you will get. Again, in the path of karma yoga, the experience which you get is purification of the heart. The path of dhyana-yoga, if you reach samadhi, and this is a big if you reach samadhi, then you will get some glimpse of spiritual reality. But here Krishna promises that you will get the full experience of spiritual reality in the spiritual world. Because the word padam means the abode. The padam means literally where you could put your foot. It basically means that you will go to the place which is totally, completely spiritual, because it's imperishable, it's eternal, and you will get the full-fledged experience of spiritual existence in this place, which is different from the promise or from the result of the other kind, because Vishateta Anantaram, it's nice, but it's not the same. You will get the spiritual experience which is full of variegatedness. That's the message which A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada brought to the Western world, because before him, people had the understanding of Indian or Hindu or Vedic spirituality from Vivekananda. And Vivekananda basically, he said that the spiritual experience is nice, but it's more or less unified. It's how you say this. I'm sorry, my English is not so good, but I'm trying to. It's a little
homogeneous.
Homogeneous, yes, exactly. That's the word I was trying to find. It's homogeneous. You get into the spiritual. It's nice, but it's homogeneous, and for how long you can stay in this nice homogeneous place, being very homogeneous. Ultimately, you will want something heterogeneous, or how you call it, something more variegated than being in this homogeneous mush. It's basically, if you have potato mush, you become the potato mush. It's potato mush is nice, but it's a mush. So, and that's exactly what Krishna says here when he says, Mat prasada tavapnoti shashvatam padam avyayam. You will get the full-fledged experience of spiritual variegatedness. You will get a different experience than other paths. But for that, you have to follow. When should I finish my class? What is the
7:30-ish.
Okay, yeah, it's no problem. So, Krishna says that if you follow the path of bhakti, the path of love, or the path of emotional involvement with God, then this is the result of it. And he explains briefly in a very, in a sutra way, in a very aphoristic way, what this path involves. How to ultimately get... Oh, Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna. He explains ultimately how to get this mat prasada, the mercy of God. And this is Krishna himself says. Please, think a little bit about it. God himself says, this is how you get my mercy. And he says it's not so difficult. Sarva karmanya api sada kurvano madhyapashreha. You do whatever you do. Sarva karmani api. Why he says api? Api means although. Sarva karmani, basically it means that you don't have to do, I wouldn't say nothing special, but you more or less continue with the same activities which you do. Otherwise, he wouldn't say api. Sarva karmani, if he would mean some special, very special sort of practices, he would say it differently. But he says, sarva karmani, you do what you do now. Api, even though you do what you do now all the time, you more or less, you don't change radically, drastically your way of action or your way of living. Of course, you have to change something, but you do. But how you do it, kurvanaha matvyapashrayaha. As Prabhupada explains, matvyapashrayaha means under my protection or under the direction, or basically it means that you do whatever you do, but you remember about God. And under my protection basically means that, of course, you don't do what he doesn't like. You don't commit violence to other people. You don't quarrel with other people. You don't do any nasty activities. You do good things, madhyapashreha. But the main thing is that you constantly feel that you are under his umbrella, under his protection, under his shelter. It's interesting that also the word vyapashraya there is a very specific meaning to this word vyapashre in Sanskrit. It also means, it is an Ayurvedic term, which basically means healing, the process of healing. And in other words, Krishna says, if you do activities by remembering about me, by trying consciously to please or to, to do it for me, in connection with me, if you do everything, that this in itself is healing for the soul. The healing process will take place. The soul, which is sort of, it's diseased. Our consciousness, we do have, we have so many problems in our consciousness. And Krishna says, Madhyapashreha, under my healing. That's another translation which could be given to here. If you do it in a very wholesome way, not in a unhealthy way, which we usually do. And basically it means, and he will explain it in the next verse, this and the second verse is the very short and succinct description of the path of bhakti. He basically means, and as Prabhupada also explains in the purport, you engaged in all your activities under the direction of the Supreme Lord or His representative. You do what they like, and you don't do what they don't like. And you're conscious about this. Why am I doing? Now, please try to understand what is the difference between our actions now at this point and bhakti yoga, because it's not so easy to understand. It's a little subtle. At this moment of time, what is the deciding factor or impetus for us to act? Why do we act the way we act? Because of one simple consideration, because I like it. Ultimately, that's the main consideration. What is the deciding factor? I like it, and therefore I do it. And why do you like it? Because of my conditioning. We think we are free, but actually we're not free in our liking and dislikings. It's the program which is being, put upon us, or by the society, by the culture we are living. That's why, in America people like to do some things, and in Russia people like to do different things and behave in a different way. But that's the deciding factor. I like it. Now, very simple, but at the same time extremely difficult change in our consciousness should take place. The deciding factor should be not, I'm doing it not because I like it, but because God likes it. And I don't do it, why? Not because I don't like it, but because He doesn't like it. In other words, and in this way, I always remember about Him. I ask myself whether He will like it or not. Of course, for that I need to know what He likes or not, and He is very clear about it. He tells it in Bhagavad-gita as it is, what He likes, what He doesn't like, so many other things are there. But the very action is not that important. What is important is our consideration before the action. Why do I do? Because I want to please God. And if I don't know what is pleasing to God or not, I find somebody who is representing Him, who lives according to the will of God. That's the essence of bhakti yoga, because basically what Krishna wants us to do, Krishna wants us to act in according to the supreme will of the Lord, which is the supreme reality. And when we act in accord with this reality, in harmony with this reality, when our actions are harmonious with this reality, we become happy automatically. Because that's His will rules supreme. There was a little funny joke which I read. One old sadhu was asked, "How do you prove the supremacy of the will of God?" He said, "Oh, it's very simple. As far as I remember myself, everything goes against my will. It's the best proof that the will of the Supreme Lord rules supreme." It never goes my way. It always goes somebody else's way. Whose way it is? It's God's way. And basically, what Krishna wants to say, that our conscious endeavors to bring our little independent will in accord with the supreme will of the Lord, which is the eternal reality, is very pleasing to Him. He gave us independence. He gave us freedom. We are free to act the way we like. But He says, I want you to be happy. And you can only be happy if you act in harmony with the will of the Supreme Lord, which happens to be me. Yeah, you can only be happy if your actions are true in a sense that they correspond to the eternal reality, which is the will of the Lord. And therefore, this deciding factor, it may sound simplistic, but first of all, it's very difficult to accomplish in reality. And second of all, it's not so simplistic. It's a very profound truth. It's a very profound point. The deciding factor from now on in my life will be whether the Lord likes it or not. And how do I know this? Srila Prabhupada says, if you don't know this, ask his representative. He will tell you what is good, what is not good. He will tell you that killing of other living entities to maintain your life is not good. Therefore, you shouldn't eat meat. And taking drugs is not good because you are basically destroying your brain and your mind. And he will tell you some other things which you should do, which you should not do. But again, what is more important is to try to create this internal harmony between our individual will and the supreme will. And by creating this coherent situation, when we are coherent with the supreme will internally, ultimately we will be trained in such a way that we will always be coherent with His will. And that gives you immense pleasure in this life because, let's say there is an orchestra and so many musical instruments are there. And you all know how it sounds when they are when before the performance, they are doing their things, It's a complete cacophony. It's totally unpleasant to hear for themselves, for anyone else. It's just, you just want to, block your ears and run away from this. And then all of a sudden, the director comes. And the director starts doing this stuff, in his own way, And all of a sudden there is a harmony. Who is this director? Director is God. That's His will. When they were doing their own, thing, it was horrible for them. It was horrible for everyone. It was very, it was not good. There was no harmony in this sound which they were producing. But as soon as they surrendered to the will of the director, which should be one will, as soon as they started doing what he wants them to do, all of a sudden they are very happy, everyone is happy, and everyone has very profound experience by listening this music, and this music conveying to you has some emotional impact, and so on and so forth. So basically that's what Krishna says. It's simple in one sense, but it's very difficult in another sense. Why? Because we have individual will, and sometimes we think, Krishna is very, I heard this sometimes, who is this Krishna to say to me that I should follow his way? I'm on my own, but Krishna says, I'm God. I don't need it, you need it. He doesn't need it, He created this place for those people who think that they can be happy without him. And they're trying hard. It usually doesn't work, but, but he says, if you want to be happy, this is simple. Just try to know my will and act according to my will and be in harmony with my will. And then I will give you the full-fledged spiritual experience which you all deserve. Being spiritual being the spiritual sparks, little tiny sparks of consciousness. But what is the difficulty, which is very difficult for us to understand? The difficulty is our ego. I want to be, whatever it is. Everyone else, it's amazing. People, usually in their life, they really hope, I can testify it on my own experience, they really hope that the world will come in harmony with their will. It will never happen. And people really try hard for this, They start with one person and they call her wife or him husband. It doesn't work. If you try to force somebody else to act according to your will, if it doesn't work with the wife and husband, they produce little children, and when the children are little small babies, it may be a little harmonious, but it becomes complete mess because they're individuals. They have their own will. And nobody of us is eligible to claim that, everyone should somehow or other try to adjust to our will. But there is one person who is eligible to claim this. That's God. That's Krishna. He says, please, and that he says, I have no problem. You can do whatever you like. But if you want to be happy, you better do it. And he very reasonably explains this. And, from the very beginning, Bhagavad-gita explains this problem, this problem which is there in every living being, because in the beginning, Arjuna wanted to act the way he wanted to act. And he was trying to prove to Krishna that he knows better. And Krishna was listening silently, and Arjuna was giving this argument and that argument, and he says, this is what we should do. And Krishna says, yeah, Arjuna, yes. And then Krishna tells him, my dear Arjuna, if you're so intelligent, why you're so unhappy? Please give me the answer to such a simple question. You think you are intelligent, but why you are telling all this nonsense to me? And you look at yourself, you look in the mirror, if somebody knows the truth, he would not look the way you look now. You're completely morose and you're shaking and trembling, You better do what I tell you to do. And Arjuna says, And that's what I wanted to say. That Arjuna says in the beginning, he says, yes, I am bewildered. I realized that much. I'm completely bewildered. I don't know what to do. I don't know what is my dharma, what is wrong, what is right. Please guide me. I surrender to you. Shishyasteham sadimam tvam prapanam. I am your disciple and I am the soul surrendered unto you. And then immediately he says, Nayotsyaiti Govinda, but I'm not going to fight. So it's really funny. And that's about us. We come to the point that, yes, I need to do something. I need to surrender. And we say to God, yes, I'm ready to surrender. But then immediately we put so many conditions to Him. Yes, I surrender to you, but I will not do this. Otherwise, I'm surrendered soul. And that's the difficulty. That's the difficulty which we have. The difficulty, why Bhakti Yoga is so difficult. Bhakti Yoga, Krishna explains, technically, it's the most simple process. You don't have to follow all these rituals of karma yoga and know so many mantras and this and that. You don't have to, and you don't have to do, charities so much and this and that. You don't have to meditate for hours and hours and fast and live a very rigid life of dhyana-yogi. It's in one sense simple, and therefore Krishna says, Sarva karmanya pisada kurvanaha. You can do, practically all the activities which you're used to do. You don't have to live from the society. You can still be in the society. You can have your friends, this and that. You can have family. Yeah, but madhya pasraya. But you have to surrender to me. But you have to take shelter or protection of me, which is difficult for our ego. The ego revolts. Ego doesn't like this process to surrender, this surrendering business. And therefore it's a gradual process, and then, first it is explained that we meet a spiritual master and we like him and we think he's a cool guy. Let me listen to him every now and then. And then gradually we understand he is something special, and then we try to surrender, and then ultimately we come to the point and we again officially say, yes, I surrender unto you, but I will not do this and this and that. But, we will not say this, but we mentally, we know the list which we will not do, and then gradually, this is a gradual process of bringing our individual will in the harmony with the Supreme Will. It cannot be instant. Even though sometimes it is described that this is a very short path, it is a relatively short path, but it's not such an easy path, because there will be resistance from our ego, and our ego will resist and will say, there is a beautiful quote from the Saint Augustine from his biography, one of Christian fathers. He, in his confession, his book about his early life, how he became Christian, he says, I was very, when I was a young boy, I had a hard time. I was praying to God, my dear Lord, please free me from this lust. And then immediately I would say, but not now. But not now. Not too soon. So I still need some individual, I still need to exercise my individual desire to do or to live the way I want to live. So it's a gradual process, but what Krishna says, it's very generous of him. He says that sarva karmane pisada kurvano, even if you do all the activities which you used to do, but you do it madhya pasreha, mat prasadata pavapnati, still I am very pleased. So what Krishna wants to say is that I am pleased with your endeavors. He says, I know it's not going to work immediately. I know you will have difficult time. Once was a very touching story. Tamal Krishna Maharaj, personal secretary of Srila Prabhupada, usually there was a time of the day when Prabhupada was taking his massage, and Tamal Krishna Maharaj would read him letters which would come at that time, and Srila Prabhupada sometimes would dictate his answers. And at one point, Tamal Krishna Maharaj started reading a letter from one boy, one disciple of Prabhupada who came to him. And he was describing in this letter his struggle with following regulative principles, in particular taking drugs. And he says, I tried, but it's difficult, I tried, and for some time it works, but then I again go into the same stuff. And Prabhupada started crying. He was not angry that, he promised to me not to do this, why he is doing this. He started crying. He said, look how he is struggling for Krishna. He really appreciated his sincerity of his struggle. He knew it's difficult for him. But he also saw that he's sincerely trying and how difficult it is. And Krishna says here basically the same thing. I will be pleased if you try. It may not work immediately. If it would work immediately, Krishna would not say mat prasadat. Krishna would not use the word by my mercy. Basically, the word by my mercy means that you are not yet perfect in your endeavors. If you would be perfect, why Krishna would say, Krishna would say, and then I will take him. He says, by my mercy. It means that, he's trying. And that's in itself is a very big achievement, especially in this day and age. If people are trying to bring their individual will or individual consciousness in harmony with the Supreme Will, which is the path of bhakti, which is the path of love. Because the path of love is this, harmony of the will, when we surrender and when we... basically, what love means that I do what the one whom I love wants me to do. Simple. And what is love of God? I do what God wants me to do because I love Him, because that's my nature, because that's natural for me. And Krishna says, I'm pleased with even little endeavors in this path. And therefore he says, Nehabhikramana shasti pratyavana videte svalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahatobhayat. Even if somebody is doing little bit in this path, it never goes in vain. It's always brings some benefit to the human being if he's trying to follow this path. And in the next verse, 57th verse, he will continue. These two verses, he is more or less concluding the description of following three paths, spiritual paths, and the resulting or consequent experience which people will get. And by mentioning bhakti-yoga last, he wants to say that this is what he wants us to do. And then he will, of course, say it very clearly at the very end of Bhagavad-gita, which is just a few verses away from the present verse. That's what I would say tonight. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Do you want to take a question?
Yeah, if somebody has a question, yeah.
So,
in the beginning I understand I can do what I want, but I should do it for Krishna. Now I take a step up. I don't want to do what I want anymore. I really want to do what I want to surrender more. I want to do what Krishna wants me to.
Yeah.
So circumstances come up, and when I'm trying to do something with Krishna, but it becomes a little difficult. There's obstacles. So I look at Prabhupada's example. So in Jhansi there was obstacle. The governor's wife wanted. So Prabhupada struggled a little bit, but then he gave up. In Juhu there was obstacle. Prabhupada didn't give up. He fought and he fought and he fought. So now I look at myself and I'm trying to understand, how do I know how much to fight to go forward and how much not to fight? And if I can put one constraint on your answer, Maharaj, if you don't mind, the general principle is, well, the Guru will tell you. But practically speaking, the Guru will not be there every time. So how can we know how much to put, if we are sincerely trying to surrender, how much to push when there's obstacles in what we're trying to do for Krishna?
Well, that's why Krishna in the next verse, he speaks about buddhi yogam. Basically, and he says, Dadami buddhi yogam tam yanamam upayantite in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad-gita. He says, for those tesham satatam yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvakam who are constantly worshipping me with love, tesham satata yuktanam, who are constantly engaged, trying to worship me, dadami buddhi yogam tam, I'll give them the intelligence or the direction. And basically, ultimately, we will have to develop this intuition, internal intuition, which will help us to determine what is the will of God in this particular circumstances. I know that you're not happy with my answer, but let me continue for a little while, and then I'll give you the chance to. There is a very interesting episode which I recently also recalled, or retold in Russian, in Mahabharata, where the 5 brothers Pandavas are coming back from Swayamvara of Draupadi, and Arjuna, he won this trophy, this prize. Draupadi, very beautiful, the most beautiful and most qualified woman of that time, and he's supposed to become the husband. And their mother is alone at home, and she's nervous because it's so late, and it's a dangerous adventure to go where there are so many, warriors. So she's at home, and from behind the door, Arjuna says, "Mother, look what we brought to you." And she, being relieved, immediately answers to him, whatever it was, just share it between yourself. And then she sees what he meant, and she becomes horrified. First of all, because she never in her whole life said lie. She never, so she immediately begs Maharaj Yudhishthira. He says, "Do whatever you like, but you have to protect my words." I said, "You share, I know it's totally strange, but, And Maharaj Yudhishthira after some time says, yeah, we all married this one woman. And they ask him, how is it, especially his would-be father-in-law, Maharaja Drupada, asked him when he suggested to him that we all become husbands of your daughter. It's a nice news for her. Even at this day and age, it sounds a little strange. So, Maharaja Drupada, the father of Draupadi, he says, how is it proper? And Maharaj Yudhishthira gives him a very amazing answer. He says, it's proper because my heart tells me that it's proper. And because I trained my heart in a certain way, my heart never lies me. because my heart is, I can trust my heart. If we will, if we will always say, because my heart says this, it may not be so successful, but he trained his heart. And then he explains on the basis of Shastra, he quotes Shastra, he also asks Vyasadeva, the guru, to confirm it. So he goes through the confirming process, but what he in essence says, that if your heart is trained in this process of surrendering to the Lord, then you can trust your heart. And then you can get the intuition, which is coming from within, and this intuition will show you the course of action.
May I say something?
Yeah, sure.
Side note, Vyas comes and also tells a story that Draupadi in her past life,
Yes,
5 times asked for a husband.
yes.
So I understand, but I'm not on that process, that platform, Dhammi Buddhi Yogam Tam. And what I'm afraid of is that if I go by my intuitions,
Yes.
my conditioning will
Yes.
guide me in the wrong way.
But if you are still sincere in your endeavors, then Krishna will find a way to actually put you on the right track, even if you make a mistake. That's at least what would give solace to me. We are prone to do mistakes. We will inevitably do mistakes. But if we are sincere in our endeavors to do it the way Krishna please, Krishna will find a way. And Prabhupada, he was changing his course of actions. He was trying different things, and some things didn't work, some things worked. So that's a process. But ultimately, Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam, Krishna will give intelligence. Krishna will bring you closer. Even if initially it may, seem differently, but it's a process of coming closer to you.
Haribol Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Prabhupada always used 7:15s. In his own words, he said there's no loss or diminution on the spiritual course.
Yeah, Bikramana Shasti Pratyavayana Vidya.
He would remind me of that all the time. He would punch me. You've fallen down again.
Yeah.
But it's picking yourself back up and getting back on course.
Yeah. There is absolutely no loss and diminution. That's a solace. Otherwise, on our own, that's the difference. In the path of bhakti yoga, we depend on the mercy of the Lord. And in other paths, we depend on our own endeavors. And who would like to depend on his own endeavors exclusively and a spiritual path? That's a very dangerous proposition. And there is one beautiful saying which I like very much by Prabhupada. He said, one disciple told him, Prabhupada, spiritual life is so difficult, I'm almost crying. And Prabhupada says, yes, spiritual life is very difficult, but material life is impossible. Yes, it's difficult. Yes, you have to struggle, but you have to struggle anyway. So it's better to struggle with some result at the end than to waste your life by struggling uselessly. Okay. Yeah.
You talked about the difficulty of meditation, almost as if in a little bit contrast to the process of bhakti. So I know in the Bhagavad-gita, at least twice, Prabhupada says you have to engage in devotional service in full Krishna consciousness. And I know, chanting Hare Krishna for a few years, that it's hard to just, Prabhupada would say, usually just hear the mantra. But that's very, very difficult. So my question is, where does meditation come into our practices? I know in more advanced stages that Rupa Goswami is saying that there's meditation. So at what point should we actually try to begin to meditate on Krishna in our practices?
The meditation comes from the very beginning, but it's a different kind of meditation. And the difference of meditation, or the style of meditation which we should try to engage ourselves from the quote-unquote usual meditation or normal meditation or whatever it is that from the very beginning we try to engage our emotions into the process of meditation. When there is no emotions involved in the meditative process, it becomes boring. But when Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu explains the chanting of the holy name, the very second verse where he explains the chanting of the holy name in the beginning stages, he explains what should be the emotions there, what should be the bhav, or the emotional content of our consciousness while we are chanting. Nam nama kari bahudanija sarva shaktis tatrarpitaniya mitasmaranina kalaha etadrishita vakripa bhagavan mamapi durdaiva midrisham. So by lamenting or by regretting about our durdaiva, the bad luck which forced us to commit offenses. So these sentiments or these emotions help us in this meditation process rather than just trying to do it in a mechanical way, in a yogic style, so to speak. That's so, and then higher and higher sentiments are being involved. Or at least there is another emotion which is there in this verse, is the emotion of gratitude. Nam nama kari bahudanija sarva shaktis. You invested all the shaktis in your names. You made yourself so accessible, so easily accessible, because you're there in the names. So if we remember about this and we have the gratitude towards the Lord and chant the holy name with this emotion, it's a different exercise and a different result.
Maharaj, would you like to?
Yes, sure.
Would you like to leave it here?
Sure.
Okay.
I can do it.
So, is that good?
Yeah, she had a question.
Oh, go ahead.
7:30. There is one instruction by Shiva Ramaswamy that I don't understand. It's in relationship to following the Krishna's will. Radha Govinda Prabhu was explaining. Maybe you can comment it.
Who's?
Radha Govinda Prabhu, his spiritual master Shiva Rama Maharaj, gave this instruction. So he said that there was a difficult decision he had to make, and that would affect his whole life. And he went to Shiva Rama Maharaj, his spiritual master, and asked, "What should I do?" And he said to him, "Why do you think that I should tell you? Why are you asking me?" And he said that because you're a representative of Krishna, and by your words I can judge what Krishna wants, what is his plan. And then Shiva Rama Maharaj said that, "Why do you think yourself so significant? That why do you think Krishna has some sort of specific plan on you?" And this really humiliated Radha Govinda Prabhu. And then he said, "Well, what if I?" And he said that you should take responsibility for your decision. And then the story goes on. He made a wrong decision, but he learned from it. But what does it mean to take responsibility or to follow Krishna?
Even Krishna himself says to Arjuna, "You please carefully think about everything which I told you, and then do whatever you like." He's very clear about this. You just ultimately, you just think about it. Krishna gave him the complete freedom. He says, yeah, but you please think about it. Don't act in a hurry. Don't do it just by using your karma and samskaras. I gave you this path. I explained to you this philosophy. You just think about it and then do whatever you like. But first think about it. So Krishna doesn't want to absolve us from the responsibility which we have for our own actions, but he wants us to do it consciously, and he explains what he likes, what he doesn't like, and then he gave us the intelligence to use. So basically, this particular instruction means don't forget that you have intelligence. Don't become a blind follower. And once there was a disciple of Srila Prabhupada who was completely surrendered soul, and he was a Sankirtan marathon, Sankirtan leader, and he was always saying, whatever Krishna desires, if we don't put petrol in our, in our cars, and the car stops, it means that Krishna wants us to stop, so we'll stop and we will take some. So, and then the devotees under him, they realized that something is wrong, but they couldn't, because he was so convincing. We do whatever, whatever Krishna wants, we do. So they asked him to write a letter to Srila Prabhupada, and he wrote a letter to Srila Prabhupada asking, what does it mean to surrender? And Srila Prabhupada answered to him, surrender means use your intelligence. That's what surrender means. Given by God, but by reading the books, and you tune up your intelligence. Krishna says, do whatever you like, but first hear what I said. First think about it. Asheshataha means very thoroughly think about what you have heard. Okay.